It was a quiet morning in Nashville, the kind where the city still hums softly before the world wakes up. But that peace didn't last long, because within hours something happened that no one could have imagined. Miranda Lambert, the woman who once shared the brightest and most painful chapters of Blake Shelton's life, was seen walking into the very hospital where he was recovering after a sudden and frightening health scare. For years, the two country music legends had lived separate lives, their love story long over, but never truly forgotten. So when witnesses spotted Miranda, wearing a simple denim jacket and black cap, eyes heavy with tears, entering Blake's hospital room, the entire music world stopped in disbelief. No red carpet. No flashing lights. No press appearances. Just silence, tension, and two hearts with years of history between them. Reports say that when Miranda entered that room, time seemed to freeze. Blake, resting after his blood pressure attack, slowly opened his eyes, and for a moment it was like all the years apart had disappeared. What followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, human, and deeply emotional. This wasn't just a hospital visit. It was something much more powerful, a moment of forgiveness, compassion, and connection that even fame couldn't erase. But how did it all come to this? How did the once golden couple of country music find themselves face to face again after years of silence? Let's take a closer look at the story behind that emotional hospital visit, and the moment that reminded millions around the world that love, no matter how broken, never truly fades. Just a few days before that emotional reunion, news had already shaken the country music world. Blake Shelton, one of the most recognizable voices in modern country, had been rushed to the hospital after suffering a sudden spike in blood pressure. Doctors later confirmed that it wasn't just exhaustion. It was the result of intense emotional and physical stress that had quietly built up over months. Behind the charm, the smile, and the stage lights, Blake had been carrying more weight than anyone realized. Friends close to him said he'd been pushing himself too hard, juggling projects, appearances, and the demands of fame. "He doesn't stop until he breaks," one insider admitted. "He's the kind of guy who hides his pain behind a joke." When the news broke, fans around the world flooded social media with messages of love and concern. Hashtags like "Your Pray for Blake" and "Your Stay Strong Shelton" began trending within hours. The outpouring of emotion was immediate, a reminder of just how deeply people cared for him. Doctors worked around the clock to stabilize him, assuring everyone that he was in good hands. "He's strong," one physician said, "but what he needs now is peace, emotional and physical." Still, something about this felt different, something deeper. And while the world watched anxiously, no one could have predicted who would show up next. Someone from Blake's past who would change the atmosphere in that hospital entirely. That morning, the hospital halls in Nashville were unusually still. Nurses moved quietly between rooms, visitors whispered, and outside, a handful of fans waited for updates on Blake's condition. No one expected anything out of the ordinary, until one familiar figure quietly stepped through the entrance. It was Miranda Lambert. She wasn't surrounded by security or flashing cameras. There was no dramatic entrance, no entourage, just her, wearing a faded denim jacket, a black baseball cap pulled low, and eyes already heavy with emotion. Those who saw her said she looked pale, nervous, and heartbreakingly human. She didn't want attention, one nurse later shared softly. She just wanted to see him. According to witnesses, Miranda approached the front desk and quietly asked the staff if she could see Blake, not as a celebrity, not as an ex-wife, but as someone deeply worried for a person she once loved. "I won't stay long," she reportedly said, her voice trembling. "I just need a few minutes." The staff, aware of the history between them, exchanged hesitant glances before granting her permission. As she walked down the quiet corridor toward Blake's room, her footsteps echoed faintly, like the sound of old memories resurfacing. Each step carried the weight of years, the love, the heartbreak, the silence. And when she finally reached his door, she paused. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. What happened next would leave everyone speechless. A moment so raw and real that even those who witnessed it said they could feel the air shift around them. When Miranda stepped into the hospital room, the world outside seemed to fade away. The soft hum of medical machines, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, It all felt distant compared to the quiet, overwhelming weight of that moment. Blake was resting, his eyes closed. The familiar lines of his face softened under the glow of the monitors. He looked peaceful yet fragile, a side of him few had ever seen. For a moment, Miranda just stood there, frozen. Years of emotions, memories, and unspoken words rushed through her all at once. Then Blake stirred slightly. His eyes fluttered open, and when he looked up, it took him a moment to realize who was standing before him. Silence filled the air, heavy, thick, and electric. Witnesses later said you could feel the emotion in that room even from the hallway. No cameras, no red carpet, no fame. Just two people who had once shared everything, suddenly face to face again after years apart. Miranda took a slow breath, stepped closer and whispered softly, "I just had to see you." Her voice cracked mid-sentence. Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She reached out and gently touched his hand, her thumb tracing a line across his skin like she used to long ago. For a few long seconds, Blake said nothing. He just looked at her, eyes glassy, the faintest smile trembling on his lips. Witnesses said he seemed both shocked and calm, as if his heart finally recognized something it had been missing. She was crying before she even sat down, one nurse recalled. And he just looked at her, not angry, not sad, just peaceful, for nearly 20 minutes. The two remained together in that room, talking softly, laughing once or twice through tears, and sharing a silence that spoke louder than any words could. It wasn't a reunion filled with drama or regret. It was something deeper, human, honest, and real. But before Miranda left that room, she leaned in and whispered something in Blake's ear, words no one else could hear, and that's when everything changed. The nurses outside Blake Shelton's hospital room remember the moment vividly. The room had been quiet for a long while. Then something shifted. Miranda leaned forward, still holding Blake's hand, and whispered something only he could hear. No one knows exactly what she said. There were no microphones, no cameras, no notes passed around afterward. Just a single sentence, soft and private. And yet, it changed the entire atmosphere, because just seconds later Blake smiled. It wasn't forced, and it wasn't the smile of a man trying to look strong for others. It was small, real, and full of emotion, the kind of smile that comes when a heavy weight finally lifts off the heart. A nurse who walked by said quietly, it was the first time he'd smiled in days. No one dared interrupt. The air in the room felt sacred, like the closing of a chapter that had never truly ended. For years, the world had watched Blake and Miranda's story unfold, from love and laughter to heartbreak and distance. But this moment wasn't about the past. It wasn't about mistakes or regrets. It was about forgiveness. One hospital staff member later said, you could tell she still cared, but it wasn't romantic anymore. It was human. That kind of care doesn't fade no matter how much time passes, and maybe that's why this moment struck such a chord, because it reminded everyone watching that some bonds never truly break. Miranda sat quietly for a few more minutes, brushing away tears before standing up to leave. She gave his hand one last squeeze, a silent promise maybe, and then slowly walked toward the door. As she stepped out, she didn't say a word to anyone. But witnesses say Blake kept his eyes on that door long after she was gone. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared, as if trying to hold on to the feeling of that moment a little longer. And outside, the world was about to find out what had just happened. When Miranda Lambert stepped out of that hospital room, tears streaking down her face, the quiet hallway suddenly erupted into chaos. Cameras clicked from a distance. Reporters shouted her name. And the news spread across social media in seconds. It didn't take long before the world knew. Miranda Lambert had just visited Blake Shelton in the hospital. For many, it felt surreal. After years of silence, heartbreak, and separate lives, this unexpected reunion hit fans right in the heart. Within hours, hashtags like Miranda and Blake, Pray for Blake, and Country Love Story were trending across platforms. One fan tweeted, Miranda Lambert walking out of Blake Shelton's hospital room. That's not something anyone thought they'd see again. Another wrote, you can't fake love like that. Even after all these years, she still cares. Clips of their old duets resurfaced, moments from the days when they performed side by side, smiling like nothing could break them. Videos of their laughter during interviews, their shared glances on stage, all of it flooded timelines once more. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was a collective emotional release from fans who had followed their journey from the beginning. Even journalists who had covered their breakup years ago admitted that this moment felt different, raw, pure and real. "This wasn't a publicity stunt," one reporter said. "This was a human moment, something you can't script." Outside the hospital, fans gathered with signs wishing Blake a speedy recovery. Some even broke down in tears when they saw Miranda leaving. One woman told local news, "When she walked past us, she looked heartbroken. You could feel it. The internet filled with prayers, old lyrics and messages of forgiveness." Country music lovers everywhere were reminded of what made Blake and Miranda so special in the first place: their honesty, their passion, and their humanity. But just as the world was trying to process this unexpected reunion, another twist emerged, one that no one saw coming. Because while fans were celebrating Miranda's compassion, everyone was wondering one thing: how would Gwen Stefani react? When news broke that Miranda Lambert had visited Blake Shelton in the hospital, fans immediately turned their attention to one person: Gwen Stefani, Blake's wife. Social media lit up with speculation. Would there be tension? Jealousy? Awkward silence? After all, Gwen and Miranda shared an unspoken connection. Two women who had loved the same man, both deeply and at different points in his life. But what actually happened next surprised everyone. Sources close to the couple revealed that Gwen knew about Miranda's visit before it happened. And not only did she not stop it, she supported it. "Gwen wanted peace, not drama," one insider said. "She understands that Blake and Miranda have a history that shaped who he is today." This wasn't about reopening old wounds. It was about closure. Witnesses described Gwen as calm and compassionate when the news went public. She reportedly told friends that she admired Miranda's courage to visit and check on Blake, even after everything that had happened between them. That quiet show of grace didn't go unnoticed. Fans began flooding Gwen's social media with praise, calling her reaction classy, mature, and heartwarming. One fan wrote, "Gwen Stefani handled this like a queen. She knows love doesn't have to be threatened by the past." Another added, "It's rare to see this much kindness in the middle of a tabloid storm." All three of them showed what real maturity looks like. Inside the hospital, Blake reportedly thanked Gwen for understanding. "She's my rock," he told a friend. She knew this wasn't about the past. It was about letting go of it. Even fellow country artists began weighing in, praising both women for their empathy and strength. Reba McEntire tweeted a heart emoji and wrote, "This is what real grace looks like." Carrie Underwood followed with, "Sometimes love means letting others heal, even when it's complicated." In a world often obsessed with rivalry and rumors, this story took a completely different turn, one rooted in kindness, forgiveness, and emotional maturity. And as Blake's condition began to improve, doctors couldn't help but notice something remarkable. His vitals were stabilizing faster than expected. His energy was returning. Maybe it was the treatment. Maybe it was the prayers, or maybe, just maybe, it was the healing power of peace. In the days that followed, Blake Shelton's recovery became more than just a physical process. It turned into an emotional awakening. Doctors reported that his condition was steadily improving, but those closest to him said something deeper had shifted. "He's calmer," one friend said. "It's like he's finally at peace with parts of his past that used to haunt him." Lying in that hospital bed, Blake reportedly spent hours reflecting, not just on the accident, but on everything that had led him there. The fame, the chaos, the heartbreak, and the love that refused to fade completely, even after the world had moved on. For years, his relationship with Miranda Lambert had been painted in tabloid headlines and gossip blogs, but in truth, it had been something much more complex. Two people who had loved fiercely, fallen apart publicly, and carried the scars privately. And yet, in that quiet hospital room, after Miranda's visit and Gwen's support, Blake finally understood something simple but profound. Sometimes, the hardest part of healing isn't the body, it's the heart. Friends who visited said Blake seemed lighter. He laughed more, one said. He wasn't bitter, he wasn't angry. It's like he'd let something go. Even Miranda, after leaving the hospital, seemed to find her own peace. Insiders close to her described a sense of closure, like she had finally said what needed to be said, and could now move forward without the weight of old memories holding her back. Gwen, on the other hand, continued to stand by Blake's side, quietly supporting him through therapy and recovery. Their bond, already strong, seemed to deepen even more. "We've been through so much," Gwen told a friend. "But sometimes moments like this remind you what truly matters." By the time Blake was discharged, the story had spread across every entertainment outlet. But for once, the headlines weren't cruel. They weren't twisted or scandalous, they were human. "Blake Shelton's hospital recovery brings unexpected reunion," read one. "Forgiveness and healing after heartbreak," said another. For fans who had followed the story for years, this wasn't just another celebrity headline. It was a rare reminder that behind the fame and fortune are real people, broken, flawed, learning, and still capable of grace. When Blake Shelton finally walked out of that hospital, sunlight hit his face like a quiet reminder. Life goes on, no matter how hard the fall. He looked tired, yes, but there was something new in his eyes. Peace. For the first time in a long while, Blake wasn't carrying the past like a burden. He wasn't running from old wounds or hiding behind jokes and stage lights. He had faced it, all of it, and come out stronger. Miranda Lambert, on her end, returned to her music with a kind of soulful honesty fans hadn't heard in years. In a small concert weeks later, she paused before singing one of her older songs and told the crowd, "Some stories don't end. They just change chapters." The crowd fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. And as for Gwen Stefani, she stood quietly in the background, smiling as Blake took the stage again for the first time since the accident. Their duet that night wasn't flashy or over-rehearsed. It was real, heartfelt, and filled with gratitude. When the final note faded, the audience rose to their feet, not just for the performance, but for the journey, the heartbreak, the forgiveness, the healing. It was a full-circle moment, a reminder that life's most unexpected turns can sometimes bring us exactly where we're meant to be. No scandal, no bitterness, no regrets, just three people who had shared love, loss, and in the end, found peace in very different ways, because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about the fights or the fame. They're about the quiet moments when forgiveness wins, and for Blake Shelton, Miranda Lambert, and Gwen Stefani, this was that moment.